Hey Guitar Heroes, so I'm by no means an expert at guitar, but after playing for a handful of years, there's quite a few things that I learned along the way that I wish I had just known right from the start. So I just want to give some tips and information to people who are maybe thinking about starting guitar, or maybe people who've already gotten started. So the first thing is, when you first get a guitar, your first instinct is usually going to be like, alright, time to play some songs, time to look up some music and start playing. But you might want to slow down there a little bit. So like when you're playing Guitar Hero, if you were actually playing the song and you were playing all the notes, then that means you're playing on Expert. And so if you're picking up a guitar and going straight into playing songs, you're basically starting out trying to play on Expert. So something that I would recommend rather than just going straight to songs is that you should probably get a good understanding of a lot of the fundamentals on guitar first. I would go around on YouTube and just find some like guitar lessons and tutorials and stuff. It's best if you can find one single channel that just has a consistent course where it will teach you the basics and then get more advanced over time. Because if you're just looking up guitar tips, you're going to be bouncing around to different channels and you're just going to be hearing a lot of the same basic information. And you'll just be bouncing from one level 1 to another level 1. And so yeah, it's a lot better if you can find just a consistent course where you can progress naturally. Back when I first got my guitar, I bought a course for about $100. And it was just a huge, long video series just going from beginner to advanced, teaching you all about what kind of gear you should have, to how to tune it, to how to play basic chords, to playing scales, to soloing, to rhythm, and all sorts of stuff. So I would say that you really want to get a basic understanding of how the guitar works, and especially how tabs work, before you start learning to play songs. But then once you're actually good enough and you can read tabs, go check out songster.com. I don't know why Songster isn't talked about more. It's by far the best tab website I've ever found. And so just go on there. You can actually just push play and it will play through the tab. It's almost like playing Guitar Hero. And so I use that website for almost all of the music that I learn. But something to keep in mind when you are reading music from tabs is that tabs are not always correct. Sometimes you gotta use your better judgment to override what the tab is telling you to do. And that's fine. Sometimes you can just put your own style on it. But yeah, don't feel like you always have to trust tabs 100%. They're usually made by fans who are listening to it by ear, not by the people who actually made the song. So another little bit of information, it's kind of a funny one, is that when you first walk into Guitar Center for the first time, you know, there's pictures of all these guitar legends on the wall. It almost looks like they're putting up a prayer circle to John Petrucci or something. And it's like the store is there saying, look at all these rock legends. You could be like this one day if you buy a guitar. I mean, it's a pretty good marketing strategy, let's be honest. But it kind of puts you in the mindset of like, oh man, if I want to be good at guitar, I need to look up to these guitar pros. I need to love John Petrucci and Joe Satriani and Steve Vai and James Hetfield, and you know, all the guys that are up on the walls. And you see all their signature guitars. And you almost feel like when you're buying a guitar that you're getting forced into this guitar culture, where it's kind of like there are cultural rules when playing guitar. But I'm here to tell you, you can ignore all of that. Nobody's gonna come after you if you are a guitar player and you've never learned to play Stairway to Heaven. It's not a big deal if you don't want to learn to play Master of Puppets, or Sweet Child of Mine, or Wonderwall, or any of those songs that are like stereotypical guitar player songs. I mean, if you really want to show off to parties and people are always asking you to play songs, then sure, maybe go for it. But you're not necessarily obligated to learn all of the classics, as they would call it. And even when you go into Songster, you look at the list of songs, it's sorted by most popular, so of course it's Stairway to Heaven, and then Metallica, 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 Sweet Child of Mine, Back in Black, Metallica, Crazy Train, Metallica. It's kind of funny that so much of the guitar culture is just so obsessed with rock and metal from the 70s to the 90s. And so I just want to say it's okay to just kind of ignore that whole scene and just play what it is that you want to play. If you were picking up a guitar for one specific reason, like me, you just want to play technical death metal, I mean, once you've learned the fundamentals, just stick to what you enjoy. There's no point in wasting your time playing a bunch of different genres that you're not really a fan of. Which is, like I said, I don't really care to go learn all of those classic rock songs because, like, I'm in it for one style of music and that's pretty much it. I mean, if you want to be a really well-rounded guitar player, it doesn't hurt to go learn some jazz, learn some rock, maybe learn some country, go learn acoustic guitars. But if you're only in it because you just want to play one style of music, then just do that. Nobody's stopping you. Basically, the whole point of this is to say that there's not as many rules of guitar as a lot of people think. It's much more about you just enjoying playing the way that you want to. But here's another little roadblock that I've run into so much over the years, and that is different guitar tunings. So when you go onto Songster and you see a song that you're like, oh, I like the guitar part in that, let's search it up and let's play it. And so you have your guitar, your 6-string guitar in standard tuning, and you look at it and it's in like C tuning. You're like, what is this? I don't get it. Why does it not sound the same on my guitar as it does in the song? And that's because everyone likes to play in their own tunings. Now technically it's not that hard to change the tuning on your guitar, but only to a certain extent. So if you're in 6-string standard tuning, you know, E, A, D, G, B, E, if you want to tune up, there's really no reason to. People will just put a capo on, that's basically the same as tuning up. But if you want to tune down, that loosens up the strings, so you've got to go up here and, you know, loosen all of the strings to make all of the notes lower. Or if you're doing drop tuning, then you lower the bottom note extra. But something you'll find is that you can only tune it down so much before your strings just start getting really floppy. And this is something that I've only kind of recently learned, is that you need certain type of strings to play certain types of music. So basically how it goes is, if you want to tune way down, you know, you want to play heavy metal and gent and that kind of stuff, you're going to need much heavier strings than if you're playing standard stuff. So the typical string gauge is a 10. That means that the top string is, the thickness is 10. You'll know what I'm talking about if you ever look at all the string gauges. But then if you want to play heavy stuff, then you've got to get up to like a 11 or a 12. And then your lower strings are much thicker. So the thicker your strings are, the less you have to loosen them when playing heavy stuff. And therefore, if you want to have, you know, really fast strumming on low notes, if you have thick enough strings, they're not going to be super loose and just flopping all over the place. And so it can be really annoying if you're like looking up different music and you're like, oh, okay, this song is in 6-string standard. And then, oh man, this song's in D standard, which means I can just tune all of the strings down. But then it's like, oh man, now this one's in drop B, so I can't really do that with these strings. And then, oh, this song requires a 7-string. And so it's like, you can't necessarily play all music with just one guitar. I mean, it's completely unrealistic to be changing your strings between songs. I mean, strings, you put them on, and then as soon as you cut them off, they're done for. You can't really reuse them. So if you really want to play a wide variety of music, you're probably going to need multiple guitars. But now let's talk about guitar gear. So it's a very common thing for beginner or even any guitarists to spend more time shopping for guitars than they do actually playing the ones they have. You guys know who you are. And it can be so addicting to just buy more and more gear. Well, as a beginner, I hope that you at least don't spend too much money until you know that this is something that you really want to do. It's perfectly fine if you only spend like $100 or $200 on a starter guitar and amp, and then just play that for a while until you get the hang of it. So many people are obsessed with like, oh, I need to have the best tone just to be able to practice. But it's like, you know, the better your tone is, it's not going to make your skill any better. You know, buying a nicer guitar might feel awesome, but it's not going to improve your skill. I know you're looking at these professional guitarists playing these $5,000 guitars, and you're thinking, man, if I just had that guitar, I would be so much better. It would just feel so much different on my hands. But to be honest, if you and, I don't know, Joe Satriani traded guitars for a few minutes, he would be able to shred on your crappy cheap guitar, and you would still suck on his fancy guitar. And just to add to that, if you want a really good tone, the guitar is not actually that impactful on your actual tone. The amplifier is much more important if you want a good tone. Like if you plugged one guitar into 10 different amps, you would have so much more diversity than plugging 10 different guitars into one amp. So that's why if you have a set budget, it's much better to put a lot more money into the amplifier than the guitar if you're looking for a good tone. As far as guitar pricing, this is something that I've always been so confused about. Because you'll see like a basic Stratocaster that goes for like $100, sometimes even less than that. And then you're like, okay, so how is that one $100? And then another Stratocaster is like, you know, like $2,000. And so that's another thing that I've learned, is that functionality really caps out at around $1,000 for a guitar. Guitars go up to 5 or 6, 10,000. Pretty much anything past like 5,000 is probably just for like collector's items. But all of these guitars that go from like, you know, 1 to 2 to 3, 4, $5,000 is mostly just for a fancier looking guitar. Now I'm a big fan of Kiesel guitars. I should be getting one pretty soon actually. And their guitars range anywhere from about $1,200 or $1,300 to about $5,000 or $6,000. And literally the only difference between a $1,200 Kiesel and a $5,000 Kiesel is just that the $5,000 one has much more options to make it look pretty. They're going to play exactly the same. They're probably going to sound about the same. I mean, it really depends on the pickups. That's one thing that can change the actual tone of the guitar, is how nice your pickups are. But yeah, paying extra past about $1,000 is really just for eye candy. There's pretty much never going to be an instance where you are going to need a $2,000 guitar to play a certain song. I mean, even this guitar, it's like a Solar, the Ola Englund signature guitar. This was actually before he started Solar, so it was a Washburn, but it's basically the same thing. I mean, this guitar starts at around like $600 or $700, and yet there are a lot of professionals who play this in their band. So there's nothing saying that you have to be playing these $2,000 or $3,000 guitars to sound great. I mean, like I said, most of the time if you're spending that much money, you're just buying a very unique and fancy looking guitar. It's not going to make you any better. It's probably not going to sound much different. But here's a tip to the people who have bought too many guitars. Like, let's say you've got 5 or 6 or however many guitars that you've bought, and there's a bunch that you don't touch, and then maybe 1 or 2 that you play the most. Something that I really like to do that gets me to play all of them, I mean, I've only got 2 guitars, but I kind of feel like I want some more. The best way to keep them all unique and individual and makes you want to play all of them is to keep every single one in different tunings. Now, of course, if you're like in a band and you go on tour, then it's probably good to have 2 or 3 of the same guitar in the same tuning, just as like backups. But if you're someone that just likes to play around and practice at home, yeah, have a bunch of guitars and have them all in different tunings. So like this guitar right here, I have in drop C. So rather than E, A, D, G, B, E, it's C, G, C, F, A, D. And so it's not only tuned down, but then it's also in drop tuning. You'll learn kind of like different uses for regular tuning and drop tuning. There's so many different kinds of tunings. There's like open tuning too, which I've never even tried. But drop tuning is really popular because it makes it so your bottom 3 strings can make a chord on their own. So you can just, you don't even have to finger anything. You just hit the 3 notes and they make a nice chord. And then you can move it around. And so it's just really easy to play really basic power chords. But that's not the only use for it. I play a lot of the Faceless and the Zenith Passage with this guitar, and so it's really nice when you want to make really weird chords like that. So I mean, you'll kind of learn what tunings are good for what while you play other bands' songs. But then my other guitar here is a 7-string. So as a beginner guitarist, you might be intimidated by adding extra strings when you can barely handle the 6. So a 7-string, it's literally just adding a lower string to the 6. So you still have the E, A, D, G, B, E, but then you add an extra low B. I mean, technically it's only adding an extra 5 lower notes, so you can go E, and then just... So it's not technically adding a ton of extra notes, but it really helps when you want to play a lot of really more complex stuff or a lot of heavy metal. And it's also really nice because then you don't really have to down tune. So rather than tuning your 6 strings down, a few notes so that you can play a song that's in, C tuning, instead I can just play a song that's in C tuning without having to change the tune. And you'll kind of recognize when you're looking up songs to play just what tunings are more common. Maybe you are really into a certain genre where everyone uses the same tunings together. And so that's awfully convenient because then you can just keep it in the same tuning and play all the songs. So like I was saying, just keep all your guitars in different tunings if you have a bunch of them, and then just have like a set list of songs that you want to work on with each guitar in their tunings. And then just like every day rotate to a different guitar. So like yesterday was my white guitar day, so today's the black guitar day. So to also talk about just like practicing songs, something I've noticed is that if I've been working on a song for a long time and I just can't seem to get through it, sometimes it's best to just move on to another song and then come back to it later. Because you'll notice that as your overall skill improves, it's easier to pick up new songs. There are some times where you want to play a song and you look up that song and it just seems way too advanced for you. And so you're just like, oh, well, I'm not even going to try this. It doesn't hurt to just look through the whole music, maybe push play on Songster and try to follow along, and you might find that some parts of the songs are actually doable. There's a handful of songs that I like to play, but there's only like one riff in the whole song that I can even play. But those are just some tips for people wanting to get into guitar. I found it pretty fun, and I've been playing a ton this year. But that's all I've got. Hopefully this helps anybody looking to start playing guitar.